November board meeting to order, and I'll have Blair do the roll call.
Mr. Breitling?
Here.
Mr. Steen?
Here.
Ms. Fry? Here. Mr. Hagan?
Here.
Ms. Haugen? Ms. Comer? Mr. Madler?
Here.
Ms. Bollinger?
Here. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the September 6th zone board meeting minutes. Are there any changes or adjustments? If not, I entertain a motion to approve.
Steen moves to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Any discussion? If no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion approved. The next item, we kind of put together a packet of information, and then I also on your place have a director's report and then a family services recruitment and retention plan that I handed out today. But our next item on our agenda, which was included in the packet that was mailed out, is the CAS, kind of our data for this last quarter, including our retention or, HR kind of stuff, the turnover rate, and then we'll just walk through that, and I entertain any questions you might have or comments or input at that time. In addition, Heather Collins is out today, but Samantha is with us, and she's played an active role in our recruiting and hiring process here at the zone, as well as offboarding, so we can answer some questions. But I thought I wanted to take a little time to look at that overall for the third quarter of our turnover. And we are, once again, on a slight increase in turnover starting this fall. And overall for the year, since January of 2022, we're at almost 37% of our FTEs have turned over. Some of those are promotions, taking a supervisory role in, and then some are, leaving the department. And it's across, not in adult protective services. That staff has remained the same. We have 4 workers there, and we have one that's been here just under a year in that department. The 2 other departments, economic assistance and family services, are the 2 departments seeing the greatest turnover rate. And we've struggled with that since probably coming on board in January. Economic assistance is really seeing impacts in providing services because of being short-staffed currently, where we are now, and we'll get into a little bit of this in the directory's report or the program updates with economic assistance with the redesign of the system statewide. We are now in a region. So some of the other zones within our region, we have given an FTE to because they could recruit a full-time person in economic assistance. And we're having struggles recruiting full-time employees in that department. In some of the smaller areas in our region, it goes all the way out. I brought the little map here. For economic assistance, our region is Cass, and then Richland, Sargent, Ransom, and then called South Country, so it goes all the way over to Emmons County. And Dickey, those smaller, I shouldn't say smaller counties, but some of those positions, if they can have a worker that qualifies and is good, that is a good solid position, and somebody probably will stay in that position for quite some time. They're going to be serving we're serving all of the same clients. We're sharing and leveling caseloads with that regional approach to economic assistance. So that's why it was a benefit to share our FTE with that region if they had a good qualified candidate, and we we would ultimately be up in numbers.
So Gil, question.
Yep.
So for some reason, I was kind of under the impression that economic assistance was gonna be like statewide. But it's just, now we're talking about regions.
It is a statewide redesign, but the state is broke into 4 regions. So probably Shayna can talk a lot about that, and maybe when we get to the program updates, you probably can explain it a little better. We're working together in a region, the 4 zones in this region, to level our caseload. So the northeast is a region that will work together.
So you would not be getting cases from like Bismarck?
No.
Okay, it's just from your region, okay.
Just for our region. And we'll get into that a little more, Rick, when we do the program updates. But for recruiting, October has been our highest month this year in hiring. We do see a slight decrease in separations from the yearly average. And we've been partnering with department supervisors to leverage emergency temporary workers, in which we request through the state FTE committee to fill positions to help support our workload, both in economic assistance and family services. So maybe somebody that has done child protection in the past or economic assistance eligibility work and is willing to come in for a temporary position, we are working with people to do that and getting that approval.
The state has authorized this?
Yeah.
How many?
Do you know how many temporary, we have quite a few in family services, temporary emergency workers?
I think we've got 4 active.
4,
We had 4 active within the last month or 2.
yeah. So those,
What have we been authorized by the state?
that, we have to go and request each one.
Oh,
So we
okay.
have 4, and they, temporary
I
emergency.
thought that you originally requested like 20 or 25.
No, we'll get into that a little bit. Every one we have to authorize up to, and each one has to have a person in that position, to be able to request it. And those workers are authorized for 720 hours. So we have some of those in there.
So just a quick question, if I may. On the family services, you're short how many today, full-time? Was it 6,
10,
10?
10
So
positions.
you're short 10, you've got 4 temporary, and of course, are they experienced temporary, or are they just kind of
A
basic
temporary typically is somebody that has done that type of work before.
experience?
Economic assistance, how many, Samantha, are we short in that department right now?
10 as well.
So we have 20 openings
In
zone-wide.
economic assistance for the
10.
zone?
10 for our zone, 10 in economic assistance, and 10 positions in family services.
Say, Gail, just a quick question for some context. Year-to-date, almost 37% turnover. Historically, is that significantly higher than past years, or is it on par with past years?
I can't really answer that, Dan. That data wasn't really out there prior to our, or it wasn't tracked very well prior to our time. My gut is saying it's probably higher because of some of the transitions in onboarding and then the current labor market. The change to the zone, I think, over time has made that because some of our positions, some of that offboarding is going to state positions, that have been created because of zones. So there are workers that were county workers or zone workers, and then the infrastructure was developed as a state to monitor the programs. And some of those, and those are good positions. I don't, employees, if they're moving up, I support that. It's that transition. It's not just CAS. It's really hitting across a lot of zones.
So all of the zones will be able to tell a story come the legislative session regarding where they're at and the challenges
Yeah, that's one thing I want to bring up probably in our December meeting. We're working on talking points right now for that, and I think we need to work on some talking points for Cass.
Thank you.
Hey, Gil, just if I might, just to add on to that a little bit, answer to Dan's question, I was like, so I've been on the Human Service Board, whatever, Zone Board for 8 years. I can't remember a time we've ever been fully staffed and not scrambling to find people. I mean, it's a constant turnover deal, and it goes in waves and streaks. I mean, it just does. I mean, and economic assistance, probably the one we always heard about, when we sat in the meetings 5-6 years ago even. We're short, we're overworked, we don't have the staff, can't find them. No idea why, but it's just kind of a fact. So it's not really nothing new. It's constant trying to find staff.
And our goal is to deliver, as a zone, our job is to deliver services to those in need in our community. As you know, Commissioner Breitling brings it up, we're about 25% of the population, and there's some data in here about how many children, the increase in Cass. And if we're staying at the same level, we haven't grown with that. So that more people seeking services, more child protection reports coming in, and we're behind the 8 ball. And then, our labor market has changed, plus maybe we didn't plan for that transition of, the end of the baby boomers maybe entering retirement sooner, and then making that plan for the younger workforce that might not stay 10 years. Hopefully they'll stay 5 years. Robert?
This isn't meant as too much of a loaded question, but it seems like you're being put in a position of really almost competing against your DHS partners for needed employees within a area of expertise. Is that a fair comment?
I'd say that's fair. I think that's fair. I mean, we all want to deliver services appropriately, but when some positions go there, it's hard to then recruit.
I got one more question on this. My daughter's a social worker, going to be 4th year, so she's got an internship with foster care someplace. But are we recruiting those kids that are going to graduate? Are we offering internships where we could pay for that and have them commit?
I'm glad you bring that up, Brian. When we get to more of the program reports, we'll talk about that. That's one of our strategies that has been developed, but we'll talk about that. Recruitment, and you can read it in that director's report. We've revamped, and Samantha has been a key player in that, revamping how job postings are done to improve searchability, and the benefit package, just that whole package in recruitment. So we're actively working on some of those items. Do you have anything more you would like to share?
I would just add that we're really working at all aspects of it, from the amount of orientations that we're hosting. Are we being able to be flexible to meet, when we've got a candidate that can come in, are we meeting them where they're at to get them in as soon as possible with their schedule? Looking at when we're posting our jobs, when we're looking at the rosters, how quickly we're getting them in for interviews, and then also making sure that our onboarding process is smooth and it's good for the employee to be integrated into our existing team. Those are all things that we're looking at. We've made some changes that we're happy with, but we're definitely looking to continue to change, to keep trying to add, because we just recognize how important it is to bring in good people.
And to onboard them in a timely and efficient way, too. So Heather and Samantha, the admin team, has really stepped up, as well as our supervisors in each of the departments. It's really a team effort for that. The other program data information in there is really on adult protective services. And remember, we provide services in this region, our staff here in Cass County, so not just Cass County. And then there's case count information for economic assistance from April through September of '22. And I would say probably, well, I guess, no, that wouldn't be, because fuel assistance started October 1st. So that will change, that has increased, and we can talk a little bit about that, but it kind of shows trends.
Gail, just some questions, and maybe it's just a matter of more of a FYI. You know, the trend, I have a feeling, is probably going to continue this way based off of how things are. But my question is whether you're a single person or a family of four, what is the household income limit to qualify? Is it, is it poverty level? And if so, what's that dollar amount? I think it's just good to know is like the numbers, 10,970. And so are we talking, households average income of $20,000 a year are kind of, and what is the makeup? Is it elderly? Is it disabled? Or is it a
Okay.
combination? And I think this kind of just maybe helps with that narrative or those talking points as well. So you can maybe put a face to the number.
And each program, as you probably know, Dan, has its own requirements. Probably, I would say LIHEAP has a higher, and I don't know that right off the top of my head, but that's something we can add and include in there, maybe next month.
Because, with that too, then I'm just thinking strategy here. Depending on the program and the need, example would be if LIHEAP is affecting elderly households, that's, a story you could tell and demonstrate, childcare assistance kind of thing. And so it's kind of maybe even looking within the data to see what's the legislator who has this quick bullet point, they don't have time to read 20 pages,
Yep.
going to relate to.
Yep. Thank you. That's a good point. And I did attend the interim Human Services Committee meeting that was here in Fargo. And one of the things that I think will be going forward is to increase the TANF. You probably are aware of that, Carrie. The TANF level that hasn't changed since like a long time, 20 years probably, 15 years.
More than that,
Okay.
with, for low levels of grant amounts and then something called pay after performance. Just to give you an example, probably in 2009, we had at Jobs, the Jobs program, which is attached to TANF, we had a caseload around 200 or a little bit more each year. Right now, we have about 50. So those two things have drastically decreased the TANF caseload across the state in the last little more than a decade. So. And that should be changing, hopefully, at this legislative session. But still, it will take a great amount of time for people to realize that the program is now in a better position to actually help people. That's not going to just happen overnight. So I don't think those caseloads will go back up for a while yet.
Yeah.
Just a question on that, could we get the specs on the TANF? I know I've had them sent to me, but the rest, what are the criteria to qualify for TANF? Probably 100 of those, but if you could just send it to us so we can
Yep.
be kind of, in the know to a degree.
And maybe just an information sheet. We'll get something prepped next time. Then there's just other information there related to child protection services and intakes from January of this year to an estimate for October. Typically, my understanding in the past, October has been a really high month for reports, but actually September was trending higher, and we just estimated for October, but over 200 reports with approximately about half the workers in that. So people are having high caseloads. And then there's information on what our zone has experienced through September 2022 for removals of youth and what in-home youth. Just kind of gives you a general picture, and both Rhonda and Matt are here in the program updates. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Any other questions on that?
Yeah, I have one. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying that there was a little over 200 reports, that's reports of whatever it was,
You-
abuse.
960s that are reported to central intake that we have to go out
And
on.
then, in the past, excuse me, there used to be a percentage of those were not really valid or whatever. Do you know that percentage of the 200?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
That would be separate from that.
These are all reported that aren't, we'll talk a little bit more about that on how they come in from central intake to us, because, any other questions before we move on? I'll let you read the director's report, kind of the administration and operations section, but I just wanted to highlight a couple kudos. Sometimes we talk about issues, but Robert and I had the opportunity to actually, and we thought it was very important to go to the Richland Sergeant Ransom and the Agassiz Valley Zone Board meetings to publicly acknowledge both Kim and Lynn for their willingness to, to come in as interns here for Cass Human Service Zone in a time that was greatly needed. And personally, for me, they're great mentors, and without that support, it would have been a really hard onboarding. So we went out and provided an in-person thank you to both of theirs, each of them and to their boards. And I think that was very appreciated by their boards, that they needed to be recognized. So we had that opportunity to do that. And Paul, with the Director of Equalization here, has worked with our EA, and he provided a shout out to our EA team and to Shayna for the assistance. And I thought that was a good partnership and something that hadn't been done before. Some other areas that I just want to highlight, and we can talk a little bit more on as we get going here after the program updates, but administration, our zone administration has been working pretty diligently and advocating with our state partners regarding the continued challenges with the labor market and our workforce climate here in our region and within our zone, and trying to relate to compensation, equity, and retention. We have put out a few feelers for a zone-wide equity adjustment that didn't go very far. So we're going back with Plan B and seeing what happens with that. But I want to keep you all informed, and that is another talking point for our legislative session too. Ultimate goal is we not only want to deliver the highest quality of services to those people seeking our services, but I want to not reward, but to keep our employees. It is so important, and it's hard work across the zone. So, and then as a Zone Director Association, we have a meeting this week, and we will continue. I sit on a work group to talk about some zone statewide association talking points for the legislative session too. So, and another highlight that we're excited to be partnering with NDSU College of Business, Dr. Marino and Dr. Hong in it's their research that they're going to be looking at and working with our zone to provide some generalized, looking at organizational change, what's working, the impact, and things like that. So that's just getting kicked off probably later this week with those professors. That said, there was any questions in general? Otherwise, you can read information on the adult services information, economic assistance, and Shayna is here if you have some specific questions, but our unit has merged our eligibility staff and case processing work efforts with Richland RSR, our partners to the south, and to South Country. So we are leveling cases across those partner zones. in part of going live with eligibility redesign and on February 1st, not that far away any longer. So we're doing that. As of the 1st of October, heating systems started, so that increased the number of applications coming in, and that will continue. And then as well as ACA, Affordable Care Act, open enrollment has now begun in November. There's a lot of change happening, but we're willing to adapt and provide assistance. With that, there are going to be hiccups in the process, and their phones have been busy and not always timely in our ability to answer just because of the shortness. Does anybody have any questions about economic assistance and redesign or anything that you'd like to ask Shana? She's the expert in the room. Shana is a lead worker there. Not, we will move on. Probably the main thing, one of the main things I wanted to talk about today is, and I included this plan that was submitted on Friday to our state partners for family services recruitment and retention plan that we've worked pretty diligently with both Rhonda, Matt, myself, and the admin team in putting together like ultimately what needs to happen and what's the data behind that in family services so we can deliver services to our region, to our constituents in a timely manner. I know this plan will not change things in a month, but I feel very confident that would set up the department for the future. And ultimately, this plan is requesting 8 more FTEs. Based on the increase in population in our area, the increase in child population in the last 10 years in our area. We know how many schools have been built, and basically our family service department has stayed at the same level of FTEs. So we're not only looking at recruiting, but how we select our organizational structure, orientation and onboarding, the ability to have some career development opportunities within the department to retain employees, and the importance of doing some internal training and onboarding of employees within our own department, in our zone. Recognition is part of it, as well as supervision. So I'm gonna ask Rhonda Hoff. I'm not sure if you've been here since you've started. Rhonda Hoff, who's sitting there in the back of the room, she is our new family services manager. And she came to us, well, she's a former Cass Social Services employee. I'm not sure how many years ago, but she worked in child protection. She worked in case management. She worked for our state partners as a field service specialist most recently, and she came back to the zone and is part of this change as well. Matt Gebhardt, and if both of you want to come up and just provide a little update or answer questions on the plan or what's happening. Does anybody have any?
I just have a question on selection. Gail's had a chance to read this now, but so under the second paragraph there, I totally understand. Qualities that cannot be trained, values and beliefs related to supporting families that believe in family-centered, strength-based practice. How are you going to determine that when you're interviewing somebody without getting into trouble?
Well, that's part of this. We still have to meet the job
Yeah, I
requirements.
see that.
Yep.
So in addition to the job requirements, it's stuff that cannot be trained, and so these are gonna be a base, but I'm just curious, how are you gonna get to that point in the interview process without getting yourself into trouble?
So I think I could, if I may address that, like, so it could be questions like, what's your belief that people can change? Like, what's the potential for people to make changes in their lives? To just get at certain attitudes about the work, because we know folks aren't coming in with a lot of expertise in, say, safety assessment. So if we're holding the bar around safety assessment, then we're getting candidates who, aren't qualified. And so we're boosting the training and onboarding piece to give them the technical wherewithal, what we can hire for those qualities. Yeah, like belief in caregivers change, belief in that this is worthy work in the community, that the communities we're supporting. I mean, it sounds very basic, but attitudes on quite a range.
Yeah, my thought there would be, my thought there would be, and you probably are gonna do this, because we do it in our regular interviews too, is very scripted questions. Without deviation from those questions.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep, we have,
So we've got a standard set of questions, and we've merged them so that we're able to interview a wider selection at once. So rather than having it segmented to CPS or to case management, combining them together to have a consistent set of questions across. In the past, where it might have been looking for a specific skill set or ability to think in relation to the actual job duties and the thought processes of those actual actions that they're taking, opening up to a thought process. How are you thinking through things when you're presented with it? How would you work through a scenario? And so as long as we're consistent with that, I think we should be able to identify some of those things without directly looking at the job work having been done before.
and we're doing some of that, it's more of a team approach with the interviewing within family services, meaning that it's both a CPS supervisor and a case management supervisor from those teams. So it's not just, we're trying to select the best candidate for that and the best fit, knowing that it's a team and not just, I just work for CPS or I just work for the case management. It's a team approach. And that has seemed, we can do that without needing to add extra positions. But ultimately, we're requesting 8 FTEs to add another child protection supervisor and 2 CPS workers. So we would be able to level a little bit better the amount of supervision, direct reports to those supervisors, as well as the number of cases each of those workers would ultimately take. Of course, if we're fully staffed. But this would also allow for that kind of overstrength as people come in. Plus 2 internal full-time trainers, both one on the CPS side and one on the case management side. So that would address the onboarding and the specific training related to onboarding of those positions. And really take some of that off of supervisors directly too, because that can, with that amount of people coming, it can really tax that supervision and allow supervisors to provide that supervision. There's some data in there. Like I said, this just went late Friday to our state partners. I'm sure there'll be further discussions coming, but we've had a couple meetings with both our Director of Zone Operations and the Child and Family Services Director about, our plan and what's needed moving forward. And I will keep you abreast on what the next steps are with that. That proposal, I'll call it proposal number 1, to overstrength and where we got some case aid positions. We also are re-engaging with the interns and actually have worked closely with Moorhead State, Minnesota State Moorhead, whatever that's called now. And we are able to pay those interns. So we have 2 interns that will be starting and possibly a couple more in the new semester. So we hope that is not only a great opportunity internally, but a potential recruitment. And even with the case aides that are working, so those are students in the social work program that are not ready yet for their internship, but they're seeing the child welfare work. They're getting exposed to it. Maybe the next step then is they're going to be the intern, and then we could be feeding. So it's a recruitment effort on that regards. Questions? Thoughts?
question. So I'm looking on page 4, so summary of position request. if I counted correctly, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8.
8.
These are 8 new positions that haven't previously been identified within CPS in our
There-
zone.
There are 8 new FTEs to our zone. Yeah.
How are we doing on that so far as a request? I mean, 8 and, it's gotta be a huge request.
We'll see. I'll keep you
I mean, you
posted.
must get some feedback along the way, because it's already November, right?
I'm feeling, they were open. I said I'm probably looking at 8 new FTEs for our zone to be able to do the work. I felt very positive after. I'm not sure if I'll get all 8, but ultimately, I think for the future, this is what the department needs. It's not only, and I forgot to mention, an administrative and billing or credentialing specialist. That's an opportunity. We have opportunities to bill back for targeted case management. But there's a big credentialing process related to that, and that has fallen off in the last couple of years. So if we have one point person, that could bring revenue back and almost fund that position. And then a senior analyst outcomes and community partnership, I think that is very key in moving forward with our community partners to provide education. It's a community effort, child welfare, to re-engage with the school systems, to re-engage with our foster parents, to have that understanding that we all work together is so important. Dwayne?
One thing that we need to keep in mind is Election Day is tomorrow, and we're going to start meeting later this month with the elected legislators. I've had an opportunity to speak to some of them beforehand because they're unopposed. And if we're going to get anywhere at the state level, we're going to have to convince those local legislators to speak out strongly in support of what we're trying to do here. And it's important that each and every one of us do so.
I appreciate that, Dwayne. I think that's very key. I've had, I mentioned to Brian before the meeting, had the opportunity to have coffee with a couple legislators. And I believe the commission, there'll be a county legislative meeting probably in December. But on the advice of the people I was talking with, I want to plan a coffee open house at the zone with some legislators that can come, and they said, oh, if you could give us a tour. I said, you'll see a lot of office spaces, but I think to get them in the building and then to have our talking points to share with them. And I, of course, invite all the board members to be part of that. I think that's key. Their suggestion was sometime the week of December 5th, middle week, after they do their, so more to come in December on that. I feel like I've been all around. I like all around, not very organized on this.
Though, I mean, this is a tough role, though. I mean, if you're short 20, I mean, it feels like you could have 8 internships, so if the kids are gonna graduate this spring, just to kind of help you get ahead of the game here, because
But with those interns, remember, Brian, we need to provide that supervision. So we have to be, cognizant about,
but I
Yeah.
mean, you're way behind the game, or start them earlier than the seniors, like. But anyway, it'd be nice if you had some talking points, you could share those with us that early on,
yep,
because we do get questions and stuff on the side from time to time.
Yep.
So, so.
I'm on that work group, and then we're working on some together. And I'd be open, if any of you have some suggestions, let's get together and meet and talk about that. One other item, anything on that? Financials are on there. We did talk a little bit about, we are putting together another proposal to share with our state partners, requesting a zone-wide retention bonus. So I'll keep you posted if anything happens. That's my plan B. we tried Plan A and that didn't go very far, so we'll try Plan B. And see, I feel important for our team members that it's my role to understand and to support, and I think it's warranted. But I do have to work through the appropriate channels to get that approval. So Plan A didn't work, so I'm going to go with another plan, and we're just in that development of getting that to the committee for that request. Questions? There was something else, but it just, oh, another thing, and I'll have more about that in December. In January of the year, in January of 2023, we provide employee recognition of those that met milestones in 2022. The Zone Unified Policy has guidance on what's provided at what stage, and hoping to do that and have the zone board participate in that recognition. So stay tuned, but we would love to have you part of that. Any other questions?
Hey, Gail,
Mhm.
I have a question, and I don't know if I missed this or not, but it goes back to the removals in home care. And seeing that big spike in September of removals was like, oh boy, what is going on? And maybe that falls into that larger picture of stress, behavioral health, and other things. And if so, just trying to understand it, and or the population, the child population in this area is increasing, and maybe that's on par with that. But just trying to understand is like, whoa, that was a big spike of removals. And then going back to the solution and the upcoming legislative session is I'm not sure if more money will matter other than because there's no live bodies, no population, right? And so just trying to maybe see if there's something there that, well, why was the spike if you know, and then is there a way to maybe put this into the data as a talking point as well? I don't know.
I'm going to call on Rhonda, or because she's been in the business, or Matt for a long time. If
Some of
there's,
it's just proportional to the number of reports that come in September and October. October and March are the two highest months usually. October turned out to be higher than September once we calculated the last week. Our projection was a little conservative there. So I think largely it's that, but I think there may be other factors, post-COVID, inflation. There's a lot of pressure on families. It's difficult, I think. And I think that corresponds to the increase in reports and the severity and significance of the reports.
I think the years, as I recall, they talk about the reports, school starts.
Mhm.
And I have all your required reporters, teachers in school seeing what's going on with kids. So September every year, use that September, October is a huge bump.
yep.
Just because you got new people in the community, you got new kids going to school, you got all sorts of things going on, you got, I call them required reporters, I'm not sure that's what the
Mandate.
So you see them. That's their first introduction to these kids after a long summer or whatever, and so they get reported out.
Well, and what we're seeing is that a lot of our partners are hiring our staff because having CPS experience is great, which can be beneficial in that our partners now have child welfare experience, but of course it creates this turnover. And so the additional positions give us the ability to train in-house, and even it's anticipating the turnover so we can manage the workload even if turnover stays moderately high, while also essentially training our colleagues that are going to end up in schools, hospitals, VA.
And I know what I was going to mention, if we can get our caseloads down in family services especially, I think retention will be there. What I've had in a few exits that have wanted to do exits in person is they're leaving because they've heard they still have 40 on their caseload. It's too high. It's hard work, and it's too high, and it's stressful. So if we were able to, I do believe there's social workers out there, and we have good benefits. We have all of that. We've done some things in our recruitment effort and our onboarding that with this, would ultimately help. But we're going to have to take those those steps to get those caseloads down.
I may have asked this before, and if I have, I'm sorry.
No.
Do you, for these positions that sometimes are a little bit more emotionally draining and difficult, do you offer part-time benefited positions? So let's say somebody only wants to give 30 hours or 25 hours a week to a job like this, can they get benefits for that position?
Yes, we have full FTEs now, but we have had a couple part-time, long-term employees that then went down to half-time and now have retired.
But you don't advertise part-time benefited positions?
No, we haven't done that because we're usually filling at the full-time FTE, but that's a good idea. Yeah. And I don't want to forget our other important department, economic assistance. Their workers too are experiencing a high case volume. Even though we're leveling with our partners in our region, it's still a time, these months, they put in a lot of effort and will continue because there's a lot of change happening with redesign. And that's very important to realize the team members we have in that unit and, and support them as well. Anything else?
One more question on that removal. So that's 117 children that have been taken out of homes. Do they go to foster care then, for the most part?
Mostly with relatives or fictive kin, but some of those are in foster care.
So how's foster care holding up?
It's tough.
Is it tight right now?
It is. Yeah, I talked with someone who had a placement disruption this weekend, and she spent 4 or 5 hours calling every name on the list, trying to find someone who would be willing to take this kiddo. We eventually convinced the placement to keep them. So that, but it's challenging. And one of our strategies is to have someone identified just to support placement disruptions, and being a liaison to our foster parent community, just because of the challenge of getting kids placed either up front or when they experience a move, which is always terrible, really.
Yeah.
In reference to the case Matt was talking about this weekend, just to give you an example, when those children were placed, they were originally placed with a grandmother. On last Thursday, we made 38 phone calls to foster homes trying to find a placement for them. Found a placement this weekend, and that placement said they no longer could do it. They were going to 31 phone calls trying to find a foster home.
We had this problem in the past, and we did some type of recruitment marketing program, just to try to get that list up higher.
We had a foster parent family services collaborative where we really invited everyone there. We had food because, at least my view is that the best way we can recruit is by retaining and having really good relationships with the caregivers that we have. Because it's those relationships within the community that's our best recruiting. But you're right, the promos are sometimes, they don't often do well. The signs on buses, and we don't get a lot of actual homes.
Yeah, I think that meeting that was held, that collaborative to re-engage our zone with foster parents is relationship building is key in many areas, not only employee, but that is very key. And it's a community effort. It's another one of those strategies we can work on. And your representation here can help with that. Anything else? Otherwise, our next meeting is December 5th. So feel free to reach out, or I will reach out. Thank you. Motion to adjourn? Second? Brian, second. All in favor, say aye.
Right.
Any opposed, same sign? Thank you.